All right, we're with Liz Smith. The Line We Crossed is the feature film played at the Environmental Film Festival. Really interesting film. I don't even know how to describe it properly. Usually I describe, this is my time to describe the film. How would you describe it? Because it's a very unique documentary film.
So it's a film about the right to protest and basically the repression of the right to protest that we're experiencing here in the UK at the moment. And a lot of people's jaws drop when they watch it because they hadn't realized the extent to which we are losing our right to protest here. But it's told through the eyes of climate activists here in the UK who've been particularly targeted by the anti-protest laws that have been rolled out in recent years. But they apply to everybody. It just
Yeah.
happens they were targeted specifically. And you really see a journey because I shot it over 2 year period where, it starts out, they're taking direct action, they're doing slow marching and things like that. And it starts out, kind of it's already a little bit shocking what's happening at the beginning of the film,
Yeah.
but by the time you get to the end of the film, you're like, wow, we're living in some kind of authoritarian dystopian kind of world, and it's shocking because this is the UK and supposedly a democratic society which upholds human rights. So
But
yeah, that's what it's about.
it's happening everywhere in the Democrat, like having in the States, obviously. It's a very timely film. Canada, it's a very like I said, it's like we live in this age of you're either on one side or the other side. There's like no nuance, there's no extreme, there's no like kind of conversation that are happening. There's judgment. Either you're the on that side or you're judging that side. And that seems to be the time that we're in right now, which happens to be the what kind of like the underlying thematic of your film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started off making this film, and I've made a few others actually, they're all tied together with the theme of polarization and democratic backsliding. And you're absolutely right. We're not just seeing this in the UK, we're seeing it all over. I mean, America is horrifying at the moment, and the speed with which America's gone in that direction is quite terrifying. I think what's surprising is the extent to which it's happening in the UK, because I'm not sure that a lot of people are aware the extent to which it's happening in the UK as well.
So let's talk about like the making of the film. Like you said, you made documentaries in the past. This is kind of a 2 year journey. What was your game plan? Like the first time you went out and basically documented these activists, these protesters. Was your game plan to like make a feature film about this? Like what was the setup?
Initially, I thought perhaps it might be part of an element of a feature film that I was trying to make,
Okay.
but then the story just exploded. So I actually then decided to make a feature film specifically about this piece and the right to protest. But when I started, what pulled me in originally to even explore the group Just Stop Oil was because they were hugely polarizing. And the film I was trying to make was about polarization. But when I first met them, I was first of all surprised about what I saw and what I met and who they were. And they weren't at all what was depicted in the press. They were very vilified in the press. But then something happened. I heard that they were in court, some of them, for protest actions they'd done where they'd sat in a motorway and blocked traffic. And they were being told by the judge that they weren't allowed to say the word climate crisis in court to a jury to explain why they had sat in the road and disrupted traffic in the first place. So they were being tried without being able to explain to the jury why they'd done what they'd done. And I'm like, wait, this is nuts.
Yeah.
Surely you're allowed to tell the jury the full truth, the whole truth, and why you did something. So that was what hooked me in, and
Gotcha.
then the rest kind of followed.
And what was the rationalization for them or his kind of set like his basically judgment of not being able to say that that's why they're protesting.
Well, it's a very good question. You have to ask. I mean, the judiciary are meant to be independent.
Yeah,
You have to ask, why is that judge? So that particular judge was really, really pushing that. Some other judges were allowing them to explain their motivations, and the juries were acquitting them. And then
sure.
later down the road, other judges also started denying them the right to tell the whole truth in court and explain the motivations in court. So it very much depended on which judge you got, and you have to ask the question, why was he doing that?
Because let's assume that we all care about the world and so by proxy that we want to make sure the future generations are okay and there's nothing kind of crazy going on. Let's assume that we all believe that, right?
Mm.
So don't you just want to like I know I'm asking a question that doesn't really have an answer, but don't you think that just people want to know all the information so then we can be okay in the future?
So we can make our own decisions, so we
Yeah.
can judge our peers, be judged by our peers in court,
Yeah.
and so that we can, as you say, all hopefully. I mean, we've got a massive problem with the climate and environmental crisis, and we can still act to mitigate the worst effects of it. We can still act to have a fair and just transition. But it just seems that the politicians and the lobbyists and the groups behind them are doing everything they can to prevent us from doing that. And that's what's deeply, deeply worrying and frustrating.
And is it about money? Is it always about money?
Well, that's the only conclusion I can get to. Money and power seem to be just the two big driving factors behind this. You got to wonder, some of those people that are upholding these positions and pushing these positions, maybe they're not 21-year-olds who are going to have to live with this in the long-term future. But even myself, I'm in my 50s now. Even myself, I'm already getting impacted by the effects of climate crisis. We've had a mega heat wave here in London and in the
Yeah.
UK last few days, and it's been unbearable,
Yeah.
absolutely unbearable.
Yeah, in Toronto right now, I think it's 30, 31. It's pretty hot.
Yeah,
You can't really go outside. It's tough to go outside.
yeah,
So
yeah.
but I love how you kind of set up these characters in the film where like one's a retired school teacher, another person's a barista. It's like you're kind of showing like you said different generations, different backgrounds, different like economic backgrounds, different obviously religious background, different ethical backgrounds. Like these are just like people who kind of believe in one thing. It doesn't have to. They're not in one little area. They're just part of society and they all care, right? So, and you really got to know them really well. It's almost like this is a good problem, but it's almost like you want to like a kind of like a longer cut or like a series of this, and you kind of like take one of the well, like say the Pia or whatever, the barista, and just go into her world and see what her world's all about, kind of thing.
Yeah, it was very difficult to cut it down to. I mean, it's a long film as it is for a documentary. It's an hour and 52 minutes.
Yeah,
It was very difficult to cut it down even into that. But I very intentionally wanted to show a range of age groups and as you say, socioeconomic backgrounds to demonstrate that it's not just a certain type of person that's doing this activism. And what I was really struck by when I met them was um, how strong a community of people it is, and it didn't matter. It transcended age. So it
yeah.
didn't matter if you were 20 or 70 or 40. They were so closely locked together and bonded together. And I think that bonding comes in adversity. And so, because they were facing this adversity together, it became such a supportive and tight-knit community. It was quite incredible, actually. But I also intentionally put the job titles of those people under their names the
Yeah.
first time they're presented, because one of the accusations that was hurled at them every time they went out on the road was, "Get a job." Everyone assumed, because this is how the media shown them to be, everyone assumed that they were just lazy people who didn't have jobs. But they all have jobs and careers and, and doing things. So I really wanted to just demonstrate that as well.
or they get, or some of them are retired, right? And like the retired school teacher who can
Yes.
do other things during her retirement instead of going outside in the cold, I guess, right? To protest.
Precisely,
Yeah.
exactly. And a lot of the retired people, they have grandchildren and they look at their grandchildren's lives and they go, I really have to do something.
Yeah. It's really, and it's also like this is a kind of another kind of what made me think about it because obviously you couldn't get into the courtrooms with your camera, but you kind of had them out. It's like, isn't there other things to be like taking up the court's time than these like frivolous trials?
100% right. And also the policing time, the
Yeah.
amount of time and money they've spent policing peaceful protesters is incredible. Meanwhile, people who are burgling houses, doing criminal damage, doing far worse and more dangerous things aren't being policed in this way. It's absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in Canada, the police officer, that's their overtime. They basically, they're paid duty officers. They're like, so they get paid a lot of money, like double time to do. So that's not just like a regular shift. It's like the government's paying them double time to do these protests, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So you think
It's
about the money that's yeah, that's it's interesting like about like where we are. And it's like this is like I like the micro kind of look at this. Like you said, you just kind of stuck with these type of protesters. You could have gone to other protesters, but I like kind of like using this as like a macro analogy, these micros, these little small protesters. Because you kind of
Mm.
nailed it. It's like I said before, it's kind of a timely movie. I know it's like a good problem that like it's like I know you don't want it to be timely, but it very much is timely.
It is, and it's suddenly become. We've released it, public release of it in cinemas in the UK just 2 weeks ago, and it's become even more timely. I don't know if you've been following in the press there in Canada what's been going on recently, where they've prescribed a direct action, a non-violent direct action group, i.e., made them a terrorist organization.
Mhm.
And, it's really, there's throwing up a lot of questions now. They've never, ever proscribed a non-violent direct action group before, and they're putting them in the same group as Al Qaeda. It's absolutely extraordinary what's going on.
Yeah, and then they get arrested, and then they have a record, and they can't leave the country. They can't. They're flight. They're considered flight risks, etc. Right? So it's a lot of
Yeah.
this is a lot of the commitment on their part.
It's huge. I mean, first of all, a lot of them, I mean, Sam, who's in the film, one of the main protagonists, he's currently in Her Majesty's prison in Polmont in Scotland. I was able to visit him last week, actually, and he's been given a 16-month sentence there. For again, very peaceful, non-violent protest action. Now, you can imagine what that's done to his life. He's a graphic designer, he's married, he's got a child, a mortgage, all those kind of
Yeah,
things. The impact on that is huge. And then if you layer on to that now, if you are doing some kind of protesting somehow related to this terrorist organization, and you're now arrested under the terror laws,
yeah.
it's even worse. It's very, very chilling.
So let's talk about the filmmaking itself. So
Mhm.
when did you know that you were finished? When did you know that you were finished shooting?
So I had intended to finish filming after the end of the 13-week summer campaign. That was
Okay.
it. I was sitting editing. This is it. That was already going to be quite a big chunky film. And then I heard that Sam got arrested, slow marching down the road, not far from me actually, for 15 minutes, and he got thrown into jail on remand for 28 days before being seen for court. And I'm like, wow, I've got to go back out there. And so I then carried on filming for another 6 months after that. And then there was the trial at the end, where you see in the end of the film the
Yeah.
whole Truth 5 trial, which ended up eclipsing the longest ever sentences given out for peaceful protests in the UK. And it was an incredible moment because so many of the supporters came out to support those five people who were being sentenced that day. And so a lot of the people who were in the film were there that day, banging on the prison van as they were being
Yeah.
taken off. And it just, at that moment, as I was filming that, I'm like, this is it. This is the natural end for the film. So it naturally found itself.
So that was how long from the first day of filming to the last day of filming?
It pretty much was, that was probably 18 months, I would say,
18
from,
months, so a year and a half.
yeah,
Were you
yeah.
working on another project while you're making?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I started making one project which was all about democratic backsliding, and if we're so polarized, how on earth are we going to fix the climate crisis? That was the original vision. But then these stories just started popping out. So I've ended up there were kind of six chapters in that film that I had in my mind. And so I've ended up making, well, six films instead of one, of which The Right to Protest is one of those films. And I've made two others. Well, I've got one I'm finishing editing, one I've already made, and the other three, let's see if I am able to make those.
That's amazing. Okay, so so let's talk about the editing. So do you work with an editor? Or do you like what's your process?
I edit myself. And
Okay.
that's a choice that I make. You know, it's actually helpful from a funding point of view because, of course, it's quite difficult. There's so much footage to go through, and if you're having to pay another editor to be in the room
Yeah.
with you, that adds a lot of cost. But it's also a creative choice because I like to craft my films in the edit, and for those kind of films, I just prefer to do it that way anyway. You know, I know in my head where all these things are,
Sure.
the story is and where it's going and what the threads are, and I kind of make sense of the story in the editing process.
But the other argument is that you're collaborating with someone who hasn't that doesn't have the emotional attachment that you do to your footage.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The fresh eyes on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does help. It definitely helps. But for me, just the way my brain works,
Yeah.
I just maybe I'm a bit of a control freak too. Um, it just works like that. What I do have though is I have a very important collaborator, and I think this helps massively. And that's Kim, who does all the music composition and the sound.
Okay.
And I work with him from day one on a project. So when I'm out there filming, I'll tell him this happened today, or I met this person, and he'll be inspired to write a piece of music about that person or what I've told him happened.
Yeah.
And then he sends that to me. And then I end up with like a package of music that when I go into the edit, I can start working with his music from the get-go that has been inspired by the filming. And so during the editing process, the music can inform the edit as much as the edit informing the music.
Mhm.
And I think that collaboration with Kim actually, well, it's amazing to be able to work with a composer like that from early on. But also, he does give me some of that fresh eye perspective that perhaps I miss by not having an editor.
So okay, so what is your like in the film like this? You have 18 months worth of footage. I'm assuming you're editing a little bit, like you're not just editing on the day after you finish everything, but well, let me ask you that. Like, what's your process of like, I'm assuming there's hours upon hours of footage. You writing a script first, kind of writing a kind of a loose script of what the footage you have, and then you kind of have an idea.
With that film, what I did is I assembly edited each day of footage. I
Okay.
knew that quite
That's
early on. I
commitment
decided
though.
that. What's
That's
that?
commitment. That's because you're filming all day and then you got to go home and you're going to do that's pretty ambitious. That's like maybe people can do that. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would always import my footage that night straight away, so that it was there, it was captured and saved in the cloud, backed up, so that and have all the cards wiped, ready to go out tomorrow. Because sometimes I would something would happen and I'd literally have to jump up and run and go and get stuff. So I needed always to be ready and have that in. There was also a certain feeling of I need to make sure it's in there because there were times where I was worried that the police could come and take my footage away from me. So I really wanted to make sure it was backed up and secure. It's crazy to think that we even have to think like that these days.
Yeah.
Didn't happen, thankfully, but I wanted to do that. Um, so the assembly edit wouldn't necessarily happen the very same day. That would happen when I had a bit of time to do it. And then I also did, for a period of time, have some assistant editors who came in and helped me do the assembly editing.
Okay.
But that worked really well when I went to then go into making the actual master edit. And I knew I was going to tell the story on a linear timeline.
Mhm.
Uh, so then I was able to go to that day, pull out this bit, go to that day, pull out this bit, and that helped enormously.
Yeah, because you're able to like you have lots of text in the film, right?
Mm.
Where you're kind of giving us information, but it's always in a, like I said, it's always in a linear fashion. You're not giving us macro points. You're just giving us things that are happening in the moment, I guess, right? For us to, and I love the text too. It's really because like you kind of emphasize the word, and it's really nicely done. Is that sort of your staple? Is that you do that in other films as well?
Yeah, so I quite enjoy doing motion graphics, and I've done motion graphics sometimes sort of to supplement my income because you don't make very much making documentaries. I
Yeah.
often make less and less so these days, but sort of explainer videos for clients. And so I honed my motion graphics skills doing that. And so I like to, so that helps when you're trying to get those statements on board. But interestingly, with that concept of that visual with the yellow,
Yeah.
which pops out the word, that came in quite late. And it was only in the very last stages that I tried that. And I think that really helped just pinging out those key words with the yellow, actually.
No, I find it interesting because I'm like going back and watching it, and there's like a text where like you give something like approval, right? Like, and you kind of emphasize the yellow with approval. And when you're reading things, sometimes you're reading fast, especially when you're watching a film. You kind of miss that. Oh, okay, that's the key. I know it's kind of basic, but it's like it. I like it a lot because it does make a lot of sense, right? Because oh, they approved it. Okay, like it's
It
even, you
really
know what I mean? It's like you're just because you're going, you're emotionally involved in the film. It's like then like text is kind of like almost like a different side of the brain in a sense.
correct, 100%.
Yeah.
And this film is full of lots of very complicated legalese.
Yeah.
Right? And it's really critical to understand that in the story, what's happening legally. And it's also, the legalese is very dry. So how do you make that interesting to watch and keep the engagement and keep the emotion, but still make sure you're actually putting the important facts over.
Yeah.
So just pulling out, as you say, the key word, they appealed or arrested, or you get the gist of it without getting too bogged down, I think.
So one of the like I don't know if we could call it a conspiracy theory or like it's like that's part of the conversation that happens on the social media is that not that these people are getting paid or maybe they are, but there's like a super kind of god like creature out there who's got billions of dollars is funding these people to go out there and do what they're doing, right?
Yeah. No, it's just not true. It's just not true. I mean, obviously, there are people funding these direct action groups.
Yeah.
Often they are just lots of small donations from lots of people that are helping that. You do have some organizations that are coming in with bigger amounts of money. And match funding. There was one quite well publicized person, Dale Vince, who funded Just Stop Oil for a while, or put a chunk of money into them. But it wasn't just him. There were a lot of other people there. But no, it's not got some big kind of silent funder. As far as I
Yeah.
could find out anyway. I don't know. I didn't get to see that side of the
Yeah.
organization, but there was no suggestion that I picked up on that there was some sort of big secret funder behind them, other than, just lots of small bits and a few organizations that would support them.
Because that's an interesting thing, right? Because that's sort of the talking point that people give, right? Like that's what's happening, right? They're just they're being a nuisance, and that's sort of like, and then if someone's not paying attention, that's the other, it's setting up my B point, because it's not, if people are not paying attention, then they think, oh yeah, that's what's happening. But the B point is that it's all about, it still is, I don't care what anybody says, it's really still about the media, meaning that you have those shots outside the courthouse, and I don't see any media there. Maybe, I don't know. I don't see much media there. I see your camera while you're shooting it, right? But why isn't this being talked about more in like kind of the mainstream kind of media?
It's the million dollar question, isn't it? And you're right. I mean, there were some media when I was filming some of this.
Yeah,
The Guardian has covered it reasonably well too. But beyond that, it's been very poorly covered. And even when Michel Faust, the UN rapporteur, was there outside Southwark Crown Court and attending the trial that we show at the end of it, there was some coverage about him being there. But I was amazed on that day that I was the only camera there when he
yeah.
first arrived. It was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And you've got to ask the question why.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Well, I think now, well, I think part of it is that, and you know way more than I do, but I'm just spitballing here, is that the media now, news media is they're struggling, so they have to make money, and this is not a story that makes the them money, right? They're it's not sensationalized enough for them to
Well,
make.
I mean, the Daily Mail, which is a sort of, well, I'm not sure how to describe it, but the Daily Mail sensationalized what Just Stop Oil did every single day. And what they did is they called them, eco-terrorists or
Gotcha.
very, or
So they're using negativity to,
very derogative
yeah,
terms. And what they were doing was encouraging people to get out of their cars and start being aggressive towards them and push them and abuse
yeah,
them, because what they were showing was that, and the terminology and the language they were using in their articles just sort of made it okay for people to start harassing them and bullying them. And because they're non-violent, they have this really strong principle of non-violence. And
yeah.
so even when they're being attacked by people, they don't push back and they don't attack back. And there was one young man who got his head kicked in by a passerby on the road. And he refused to press charges against this man, even though he was actually very, very badly injured from that, because there's this principle of non-violence towards them. It's incredible.
Then you're gonna get the like. There's always a like. Not, I wouldn't even call it a bad apple, but meaning that there's always someone who goes a little too far, and then they can use that person as an example. See them, look what they're doing. Look at that person who did that, who like threw a rock through the window or whatever it is, right? And it's like they like using those people as examples, even though they're a very
But
small
that didn't
percentage.
happen. That
No,
was
but
what was
but I'm saying
incredible.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about other protesting and etc.
Sure.
Right? So, yeah,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. The 99% of people are protesting peacefully, and they'll latch on to the one thing that they can latch
yeah,
on, as you say. But what was incredible is I didn't see myself, and I'm not aware of any
yeah,
single incident where a Just Stop Oil protester did something violent or kicked off
yeah.
or anything like that. It was an extraordinary level of discipline that they were able to have in terms of holding on to this non-violence principle. And I think they did that because they understood that that's a critical part of this. Because as soon as you slip over into violence, then that changes the story and the narrative.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so, but you the BBC's that's government funded, right?
It is funded by the taxpayer, yes.
Yeah. And so, but are they talking about this?
No, not very much. No, the very poor coverage from the BBC, and there's this extreme amount of obsession with impartiality, to the extent where they'll say, "Okay, we need to have 50% of one side of the
Yeah.
story and 50% of the other side of the story," even though that other 50% of the story is complete disproportionate in terms of the actual balance.
Yeah.
And so that impartiality mandate, I think, is being managed really, really badly by the BBC, not just with the climate activists in other political areas too. And they're under a lot of fire about that from a lot of people about that balance that they've got.
Is that because they're like worried about not being funded anymore? Because we have like the CBC in Canada, and there's calls for that to be defunded, right? So I don't know if it's the same.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big factor. And I mean, it has been under pressure by the recent government, the previous government. They tried to pull, or they did pull quite a bit of funding from them, and
Yeah.
they're definitely under pressure there. It's a bit. They, to be honest with you, the BBC kind of it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, a little bit. I wouldn't want the job of the person running it. It's not an easy task. But I do think their obsession with impartiality has got too twisted, and we're starting to give too much exposure to minority thinking um, rather than the majority thinking. Because the majority of people in the UK support the fact that we need to do more about the climate crisis, but
Yeah.
you wouldn't, you
But I've
just
been
don't get that sense in the media.
Maybe I'm an idealist, but isn't journalism journalism, meaning that you're just showing a story? Okay, these people are protesting because someone's in basically on trial for protesting. That's what's happening right now. There's no spin. It's just telling you what's happening, right? Like I don't understand what happened to journalism. Like doesn't have to be an editorial. It's something that's happening, right?
Yeah, and if I obviously didn't even bother trying to get the BBC to commission this because I wasn't going to be able to follow the police and get the side of the point of view of the police on this film. I wouldn't have got the access. But because I only show it from the point of view of the climate activists, they would never commission it because there's not the two sides of the story impartiality
What's
thing
the other
going.
side of the story? The other side of the story is the politicians, the police officers. Like,
Yeah, and obviously there is a bit of the politicians in the film. You see Suella Braverman explain stuff. You see statements, sentencing statements by the judges. So that's important. I have put that in there to show their side of the story. But I would never have been able to get in a police van with the police who were following the climate
yeah.
protesters and doing that. I would never have been given that access. So I could never have told their side of the story in the equal way I was able to do it with the climate activists. But I don't think I should have to, because it doesn't invalidate the story that I am telling from the point of view of that I am telling.
Well, there's a lot going on in the film in terms of like there's a lot happening. And what I'm trying to say is that you kind of were able to put it all together, which is very difficult because you're talking about climate change, you're talking about protesting, you're talking about political kind of ideologies, you're talking about, but you're also giving us the individual stories of who these protesters are, and then, like I said, the macro story of like what's happening in the world. So there's a lot going on in the 110-minute documentary, and I think it's a beautifully edited film.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
were you worried that it was too long?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that, and I'm really pleased that you kind of recognize the layered nature of it, because I try not to be, I don't like sort of handing it on a plate to people. I like if people afterwards kind of start to think about it. I've observed this and I've given some facts and stuff, but it is a multi-layered issue, and it's not just a single issue thing here. I would say, primarily it's a film about the right to protest, but it's also a film about the climate crisis and the
Yeah,
macro issues, as you've pointed out. Um, I did get quite a lot of pushback early on. We're going, oh yeah, this is too long. You're going to have to cut it down. You're going to have to cut it down. And and I agreed, it was even longer, obviously,
yeah,
in the earlier cuts. And I knew that was too long at that point. And I did have to take out some scenes which I held dear to my heart. And that's very hard when you have to put them away.
yeah,
But then I got to a point where I thought, yeah, this is it. This is coherent. Obviously, I did some screenings earlier on to get some feedback from people, which really helped. But then I got to a point where I'm like, no, I'm happy with this. I think it's got the right pace. What's been really interesting is last 2 weeks I've been going to most of the cinema screenings we've had, and I sit and watch the audience. And there's no point
Yeah.
in that film where you see people start to, move around in their seats and get distracted because it just has that pace that just,
That's a bold statement in today's world that we live in, right? I go to the cinema all the time, and it's hard for certain generations to not take their phones out, right? So
yeah, exactly, exactly. To be fair, we haven't had a lot of young people coming to these screenings
that's who you
yet.
need to get. You need to get the young people. I was just talking
Yeah.
about that yesterday about like it seems like the older people are, I'm being general, are going to the cinema, but to watch these type of films, but the younger generation staying at home.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure why, because there are some young people represented in the film and quite
Yeah,
compelling characters. You
they
talked
don't
about
want to
Peter.
leave the house. That's the simple
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah, is it that? Is it
I think,
that?
well, it's like I was, because this is another topic, but I was talking about it just yesterday about like how my cinema experience going to doing the festivals from 2025 to 2019, which is only 6 years, it's completely different, right? Completely different. Like we're at the Carlton Cinemas, which is downtown Toronto, which is there's TMU, which is a huge university, and University of Toronto, which is 2 blocks away. Like two gigantic universities that are right in the corner, and they're not coming to the cinema anymore. And 6 years
Isn't that
ago, they used to come all the
interesting?
time.
That is so fascinating because I was wondering whether the reason for it is just because I'm an old person who made the film.
No,
And
no,
if it
but
had been made by a young person, would it have
that
got a bigger
said,
audience?
there's more than one like factor, right? Like I'm just giving you
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
30 cinema, my 30 festivals in the last year prognosis of what's happening in Toronto, right? So,
That
but
is interesting. Yeah.
because they
Hmm.
can watch they've changed their habits. Their habits changed during COVID, right? So
Yes.
and
Yes.
so they're not going back to their old habits, right? So
But why didn't that affect everybody? Why has it specifically affected the younger group? That's the interesting thing, isn't it?
because, well, yeah, I think that's because they have all their like I don't know, like they have all their information on their phone, right? And their phone is their baby. And just
Yeah.
like even with dating, right? Like it's they don't have to go anywhere, right?
Yeah. I made a
People,
film called I Am Gen Z,
yeah,
actually, which is all about technology and
I
young
love to
people.
see it. Yes,
Yeah, I think it's screened in Canada actually on the one of the channels there. But I'll send it to you.
yeah, send it to me. And I think that with the older generation is like they realize that they look it's time is so short. I'm being general, of course, but time is
Mm.
so short. Like I got to get out there. When I'm able to get out there, I'm able to get out there. And stats have proven that that's the generation that left the houses first during COVID too, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
they're like there, you see them, they're like they want to see, they want to witness, right? So
Mm.
that's a movie in itself, right? So
Oh yes, yes. Maybe it's actually the follow-up movie to I'm Gen Z because I finished
yeah,
I'm Gen Z. I finished filming just as COVID hit. I
yeah.
was super lucky, so then I was able to edit it during COVID. But I think the layer of COVID on top of what I found with I'm Gen
Yeah.
Z is a whole other story, isn't it? I think it's the sequel.
And I give like the Vietnam analogy because I talk to documentary filmmakers like yourself, and some of them have abandoned their COVID projects, right? Like their COVID documentaries. And it's like I give the Vietnam analogy where like Vietnam was so destructive to America. They didn't make a movie until like 78, 79, right? They gave it that distance because nobody wanted to watch a Vietnam movie. And then when
Mm,
the 80s rolled by, there was like four every year, right? So for like a decade.
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
might be the same way with COVID, where like nobody really wants to talk about it. And then
Yeah.
now then and it's
We
like
don't
there's
want to relive it right now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 But moral of the story is that we gotta get these kids out, get out to the world, right? So
Yeah, get that to the cinema.
yeah.
It's far more fun. And it's so amazing watching a film with an audience, right? Because you just feed off of each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. That said, great film. I really appreciate your time. And let's talk again when we showcase another film of yours.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.